seem stuck in time, held back by hands that are sharper and more evil with the whetstone of death than a slaughter knife dipped in poison. And yet, they move on, pulling past the trigger-happy fingers to a new world they built for themselves. Always moving on, picking up the pieces as they fall. But the pieces are different. Those fallen are lost, gone forever, and a part of them, the survivor, is lost and fallen in those pieces of the past as well. Those pieces were their all, and yet, always moving on. Moving, growing, building, marrying, having children, learning languages, finding jobs and themselves, but they seem stuck in time. Who are you now? I am a survivor, and somehow that seems all they are, to the millennial, to me, to us. This project is here to change that. The story will no longer be a 10-year saga. Instead, it will become a story of a lifetime for them and for us. And maybe being a survivor will no longer mean years of being a victim. Instead, being a survivor will mean a lifetime of strength. They said the meetings are to be informal, like a family get-together. The nerves are real. They are older, much older, not just in years but in lives, for they survived with a miracle. A miracle not just of life, but of living, to not be stuck, always moving, growing, and building. My stomach is squeezing in about 13 directions, my mind is blank, and my tongue is paralyzed, for I see no bridge between us. The springtime of her life and the springtime of my life are galaxies apart, and as good as I am at talking to older people, they are forever boxed as old people, or in this case as a survivor. Will this project help me change? Stop the boxing and maybe hear the story, the whole story? Will this project help me change my viewpoint to no longer skim, disregard, or forget, so that I too will always include the whole story? And maybe in this way I too will be stuck with life lessons that will forever guide me to always be moving, growing, and building. And so, the story begins.
This year I spent Hanukkah like no other. As I sat there staring at the flickering flames, I began to wonder, why can we no longer genuinely appreciate the Chagim? What if we were in a situation where we didn't have the means? What if we were in a place that defies time and space? What if we were in a place that feels like an endless maze? What if we were in a place where we could no longer trace that which used to be spiritual prosperity, a link, a connection to eternity? Hanukkah is a festival of lights, where we come together to commemorate the battle, the fights, and the oil that lasted 8 nights. But the battle is deeper than just swords and blades. True heroism comes from the ability to withstand pain. Mrs. Kirsch exemplifies this miracle of defeat. Her renewal, her achievements, her ability to get back on her feet. She teaches us, no matter how big or small adversity, Hashem is with us, it's guaranteed, because He is the reason we live and breathe. Mrs. Kirsch is a living miracle, because she proved to the Nazis that they will never succeed. She showed them that the more they try to beat us, that they will never defeat us. They must come to realize, for we have the ultimate weapon in our hands, a faith and inner light that never transcends. That light that shines on for each and every generation, it proliferates from the time of creation. The light is exemplified in those 8 candles when we stand and gather and take their beautiful symbol. Celebrate it, sing about it, sit around and stare. Warn those around us, we will never despair. For that is the makeup of our soul, that intuitive ability to rebuild, restart, and create a new world. Mrs. Kirsch, I cannot thank you enough for everything that you have taught, for teaching me how to overcome feelings of distraught, how to stand and act, fight for what's right. I cannot wait to pass on this eternal light.
Tu B'Shvat with Mrs. Kirsch. Tu B'Shvat is the Jewish holiday known for celebrating trees. Around this time of year, trees have begun to sprout in the land of Israel, and we excitedly wait for the trees to bear fruit. On Tu B'Shvat of this year, our group went to Mrs. Kirsch's apartment and had a beautiful Tu B'Shvat Suda. We all talked about different traditions that we have. I shared that our family tries to get a new fruit and say a Shechianu bracha. Mrs. Kirsch and Lynn shared of some of the special things their family does to celebrate, including brachos on new fruit of the season and getting together. Lynn and Mrs. Kirsch provided an assortment of dried fruits and lox and bagels, and we made compote together, which was a first for me. I later made compote for Pesach because of what I learned from Lynn and Mrs. Kirsch, and it was a big success with my family. We all started talking to Mrs. Kirsch and asked her what she thought helped her get through the war and being in a concentration camp. Our overall impression was that she had this inner faith that she would survive. She relayed to us that when the others in the camp were losing hope, she would say, "You may choose to die, but you will choose to do so without me." There was a fire inside of her that kept her going throughout the war and after, to go on to build a large, beautiful Jewish family. It was inspiring and humbling to meet and get to know someone like Mrs. Kirsch and her daughter Lynn. The hospitality and love that radiated from them was palpable. Each time we visited, I left feeling happy and looked forward to our next meeting. Thank you, Mrs. Kirsch and Lynn, for sharing your time, hospitality, and most of all, your life stories with us. You have added a new dimension of life after the Holocaust for me. Thank you so much.
Dear Mrs. Kirsch, I loved all the meetings that we had together, but there was one that I loved most, and that's going to stick with me for the rest of my life. And that was the meeting that we had on Shabbos. See, during the week, you told us stories, but on Shabbos, you lived those stories. You sang. You sat and spoke for literally hours. You shined. Your Shabbos demeanor bespoke so much about your incredible life. It told of tradition. It shone of feelings of love and hope. It tasted of warm chicken soup and delicious entrees. And it depicted real meaning in life. How life is so much bigger than the physical, and that we are so much bigger than ourselves. One of the things you told us is that your Zaidi gave so much to you. Well, Mrs. Kirsch, your Zaidi is really giving to us through you, through all of your stories, all of your traditions of family, of hope, of survival, of real life. All of those you are giving to us for our lives. Your body language told us so much on that Shabbos. Thank you for being a living example of everything that's important. Thank you for giving of your time, love, and food to us. And thank you, Mrs. Kirsch, for giving us the gift of your life. Sincerely, Mushki.
I learned many things about bravery and strength through my time and get-together with Mrs. Kirsch, but there are 3 other qualities that I associate most with Mrs. Kirsch, and they are her confidence, humor, and cooking skills. In our first meeting, we met in a classroom at TI. Throughout the entire meeting, Mrs. Kirsch would joke a lot and was very funny and confident. My impression was that Mrs. Kirsch was an old woman with lots of life experience who created a beautiful and fulfilling life for herself and family after the horrors of the Holocaust. We discussed much of her life after the war, meeting her husband, reuniting with her brother, and opening up the famous Hungarian kosher here in Chicago. Mrs. Kirsch's favorite dish is stuffed cabbage, and I must say, she makes a delicious stuffed cabbage. I remember Mrs. Kirsch's daughter, Lynn, saying that Mrs. Kirsch can have a hard time remembering, but when it comes to cooking, she never forgets a recipe. Thank you, Mrs. Kirsch, for teaching me these wonderful character traits and sharing your inspiring story. Ahuva Levitt. Through meeting with Mrs. Kirsch during these last few months, I have come to learn the Jewish pride that she had and the confidence she shows while telling us about her past. And while telling us about herself, it gave me strength in knowing that I too can surpass my struggles and hardships in life through clinging to Hashem and having complete faith. Mrs. Kirsch was able to tell us about the beauty of her life before the Holocaust. It was a life so contrary to ours, when people had to shecht and salt and kosher their own meat, milk their own cows. Things weren't that simple compared to today, where we have everything ready to be cooked. This has taught me how to appreciate the hard work that has been put in opening supermarkets and stores where there is a kosher food right on the shelves of every aisle waiting to be bought. And you, Mrs. Kirsch, were one of the pioneers of the industry. So I thank you for teaching these amazing values and for allowing me to take these qualities that will forever stay with me.
Mrs. Kirsch, thank you so much for the invaluable messages you have taught us through your memories, humor, life experiences, and food. It was such an honor and privilege to get to know you and your family over these past few months. One thing I really learned from you was how to overcome obstacles and hard and trying times in life. You could have given up after the Shoah. No one would have blamed you. But you didn't. You had the strength to start all over and come to Chicago and build a beautiful life. You had the vision to start Hungarian Kosher Foods with your husband, one of the first fully kosher grocery stores in the country. Your strength led you to serve and participate in the Jewish community, rather than abandon your faith after the Shoah. Your daughter, Lynn, published an incredible cookbook filled with delicious recipes and personal stories from your life. You did not let the past destroy you. You lived and celebrated life. What we go through makes us who we are. Your story is more than just a story. It's a lesson. A lesson I hope to one day tell my children, God willing. One thing that is truly amazing is that you told us that you always knew you were going to survive. How did you know? Your incredible faith in Hashem has always been with you your whole life. You didn't even doubt him in the concentration camps. I sometimes have doubts when people in my life get sick or something doesn't go right, but I know it is God's plan and it is all for the best. Your candidness of what it is like to be blind and how you are dealing with that struggle every day is inspiring. We cannot even imagine what being blind is like after everything you have done in life. You are so strong with your defined purpose and your will to constantly contribute to the world and society at large. Your love for Judaism and Yiddishkeit today is motivating. Your love for Shabbos and your closeness to your family and all the holidays is remarkable. Throughout the millennia, people have tried to destroy the Jewish people. We know the truth that our faith and people will always endure. Am Yisrael Chai, the Jewish nation lives. But not only do we live, we prosper and thrive wherever we are. Through your children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren who live all over the world, you are a living testament of this.